In this week's Planet Korea, we return to our occasional series on Korean urbanism with Colin Marshall and with an additional guest. Colin, as you know, is the local blogger for the Los Angeles Review of Books. He's also a prolific podcaster, writer, blogger. Let's just say he's all over the internet with cogent writings on urban life, not only here in Seoul, but in his native Los Angeles and all around the world. And as a bonus, we have somebody I've been wanting to meet for a long time. Nikola Medimorec is a German national who's lived in Korea for a while. He's got a master's in urban geography from Seoul National University, works on a sustainable urban development NGO, and he's the co-manager of Kojects, which is a pretty well-respected web portal about urban planning here in Seoul. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
It's great to finally meet you, Nikola.
Yes, great to meet you.
I've been reading Kojects for a while. One little housekeeping piece of breaking news that I've got on my screen. Apparently there's been a small earthquake near Chungnam, Taean-gun, magnitude 2.1 as measured so far. No damages. Happened at around 9 a.m. today, just before we went on the air. Thankfully, at this point, nobody hurt, no damages, but a little shudder. So, there's so much to talk about with you guys on the topic of urbanism that it's hard to know where to start. Let's start, since you're the newcomer, Nikola, with you and your latest project. Is it this superimposition of the subway on the city? You've got this really cool map that shows the city of Seoul, sort of topical map, and the actual layout of the subway, which is different than the mapped subway.
It's a new way to see the Seoul subway, right?
Yeah, right. So I saw on the internet few images of other cities doing like this kind of impositions, like overlays of the subway systems, and I thought to do something similar for Seoul by taking. You have to imagine, like, for somebody who didn't see it, to just briefly explain.
Sure.
It's like you take a picture from a high position or like from an airplane showing the urban area, and then you show the invisible element, which are like usually the subway lines.
Yeah,
and it looks really, I think, impressive to see like this something that we usually don't see. This invisible element of the subway lines, and especially for Seoul, this huge network of lines.
The Seoul subway is a massive network of lines. It's bigger than most other cities that you'll encounter and live in around the world. It's a big bowl of noodles, basically, and it's impressive. Everybody who lives in Seoul is, they boast about the subway first and foremost among the many convenient benefits of living here. But when you look at the sort of map, just by definition for a map, it's got to be sort of geometric, and it's got to be it's all got to fit in one space. And so as a result, I find that I look at the map of the subway and I conclude that certain distances will be shorter and whatever. But in reality, it's not, because the line, even though it looks short and concise on a representational map of the subway, in reality, it's huge and sprawling, and it goes around mountains and things like that.
Yeah, like, in the subway, or like above the doors of the subway, you have very narrow space, and it's very small, so you have to cramp, it's how many, like 18 or up to 20 subway lines we have here in the Seoul capital area.
That's right.
So like the schematic map of Seoul puts them all like in a very, very small narrow
tight
space,
area.
and it looks like very kind of like a small system almost. But then if you put it on like a real image, or let's on a real satellite picture or something, you really see this huge extent of the lines.
It is a massive network, and it covers this entire sort of greater Seoul area. Let's backtrack a little bit. I mean, we've talked to Colin on topics of urbanism for many, many months. I think we're going on years now, Colin.
Yes, it's been a long time, decades probably.
No, I mean, we do this thing once a month or so. Sometimes we go out, sometimes we talk in the studio. So we've got a little bit of an idea of what Colin's all about and why he's so obsessed with urban topics. Tell me a little bit about you. How many years have you been in Seoul, Nikola?
The first time I arrived in Seoul was like in 2008. And then I directly fell in love with the city and like with the people and the whole country. But really living in Korea since 2012, and then done my master's, and now working here in Korea. And yeah, it's like really, if somebody asks me what's the most interesting thing, or like what I like most about Korea, I always say the public transport system.
Me too. Me too. I think that's probably in the top 3 selling points of this city is the convenience, ease, cheapness, and safety.
Cleanliness.
Yeah. I mean, cleanliness, you know how they say you can tell how good a restaurant is by looking at the bathroom of the restaurant?
I've heard
you
that.
You can tell how efficiently a city works often by looking at the basic things like public transportation.
Indeed.
And when you say Seoul works, it's so clear just by looking. You can tell if you go to bus stops, stuff like that, within minutes how soon it's going to come. It's all networked. And even before it was so networked on phone apps and things like that, it was still pretty impressive.
And we should remind the listener that Nikola is from Germany, a country renowned for its efficiency and things working well, and you were still impressed by how Seoul worked.
Yeah, that's true, but because especially the speed and the efficiency of Seoul or Korean public transport system is on much higher scale, much better level than what we have in Germany.
Really? You'd say that? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Where in Germany are you from?
I'm actually from around Frankfurt, south of Frankfurt area.
No slouch when it comes to transport and logistics, right? But I mean, a lot of it comes back to what Korea does best. It imports ideas and structures and models and then improves them, right? Because like a lot of the public transport sort of concepts and a lot of the train logistics and high-speed trains, these are all kind of imported from sort of TGV and Schnellbahn and all that stuff, but then Korea improves it.
And what's also very important to recognize in this aspect is that the first subway line was opened in 1974 in Korea, and since in Seoul. And since then, we opened so many lines, such a huge network was built in a very short amount of time. And that's something that other cities can learn a lot from, and also that a little bit by doing these images of the Seoul subway system, I want to appreciate how special the system is and how in such a small time scale, such a huge system was built. Because if you look at Germany, systems have been built over I don't know, centuries. Or like if you look at London subway, which is around since 150 years.
Yes.
And any kind of there's still expansion of the systems in Europe, but they take much longer time than they take here in Korea.
I was just in Amsterdam and they opened a new line, and it's been 15 years they've been waiting, something like that.
Yeah.
Really?
It's been a long time there, but that's what they're used to in that part. Here, if you take 15 years, you're going to be in trouble.
Well, if you're talking those kind of time horizons, you're talking truly mega scale improvements in the city, like what they're doing over in Gangnam with the sort of combined transportation hub over there. They're building it under, I think it's either Kojects or something like that. They're building it under Kojects, and it's a combined bus, train, commerce, business kind of hub, and that's going to be ready, 2022 or 2025?
It's coming up.
It's coming up very fast. And when you're talking about urban design, 3, 4, even 10 years is not that big of a time horizon. I mean, late development can be kind of a positive thing. If you look at like East Berlin, for example, right? It skipped over so many development milestones that the West went through, and then it leapfrogged them after unification of Germany. Now East Berlin is the nicest part of town in a way, right? Because the urban features are brand new, and it's the target of really deliberate development decisions. Tell me about Kojects. I mean, I like Kojects. I subscribe to it. It's your blog and also partners, right?
Yeah, I'm doing it together with Andy Tebay. He's from New Zealand and living in Sejong City. And he founded the blog, I think, only 2011 or 2010, and I joined him in 2013. It's a website about transport and urban development in Korea. We cover, of course, the main topic are new subway lines or any kind of new public transport services that are being introduced in Korea. I like to write about bicycles, cycling.
Are you an urban cyclist here in Seoul?
Yeah. Also, for example, today I took the subway up to the station, team's media center station. But then I took a Darengi to come up to here.
That's
the bike share
music
system
to my ears,
Seoul,
man. I am a Darengi evangelist.
You're a convert turned evangelist.
It's wonderful. I mean, the dynamic of bike plus subway is just unstoppable, right? And I mean, someday those Darengis are going to get better and better, and eventually the price of electric bicycles will start going down.
Yeah, for me, Daegu is like this public bike sharing system of Seoul is the best policy that have been introduced in the last years. So I really love it, and it's amazing.
I agree with you. Tell me why you think that.
First of all, because it's like you shouldn't see it as a way to move from A to B. You should more see it as a connection to get to your nearest, or like to, let's say, to a better public transport connection.
Absolutely.
So it's great to connect to subway stations. It's great to connect it to any place that was very inconvenient before.
That's right. It collapses distances. Most people in Seoul, they cram themselves like a sardine onto the train. They have a really, they elbow each other trying to get up the little 3-foot escalator, and its commutes tend to be miserable at rush hour in Seoul. With one Daegu membership, you choose a different station that's one or two stations away from your destination, one that nobody gets off at. And you ride a bike for a few minutes, and it's like Zen, you just have this mind-clearing little short ride. That's the real magic of it, I think.
And it proves your point about, or it further supports your point about how Korea or Seoul brings in sort of Western transit innovations and improves upon them, because Daegu is I think the basis was Velib in Paris. Was that the first? Yeah. There's also one in Mexico City. They're all around now, of course. And London has the Boris bikes, but you could see Daegu as a sort of tweaking and adaptation of this bike share concept for a city like Seoul. And that's still ongoing. The system is always undergoing revision, if I'm not mistaken, right? They're always changing things a little bit about it, expanding.
Mostly they're still in the expanding phase. Currently, for like, let's say, the main challenge in this summer is now that in September we will have a bicycle helmet law. So everybody, like the mandatory bicycle helmet law. And Daegu is now also looking at options how to accommodate this law, and then maybe providing like helmets.
Those are getting stolen left and right. Helmets, apparently.
It can be a big problem. In Seattle, a city where I spent a few years growing up, they tried to introduce a bike share system called Pronto a few years ago, and it went under partially. People theorize because of the helmet laws there. That just made it too inconvenient. They had helmet dispensers, but when you have a helmet law, according to some theorists of bike culture in cities, you cannot have a bike culture because it just distances the bike too much from everyday transport. You don't wear a helmet for walking. You don't wear a helmet for the subway. You don't wear a helmet for driving. If you wear a helmet for biking, it says, "Oh, this is something different. This is not just transportation." Yes,
I think that's right. It bakes in the idea that you're either going really fast or you're going on busy roads. Whereas I'd say probably 80% of the people riding Daegu, like myself, they're just having a little doodle-doo kind of bike stroll on the sidewalk just to get to the next subway station.
Yeah, exactly. Like just want to connect really quickly to the next station or somewhere it's not really like dangerous to. Yeah,
it's not extreme Daegu. It's just it's what interests me about it is the data-centric way Korea is implementing it. I mean, it's all app-based, of course, and every time you use it, you are contributing another little sort of data piece of the puzzle for Korea to overlap its Daegu data and its subway data and always sort of improve how people get around the city, and I think the key to it is it's well maintained as well. Yeah. I'd be interested down the line to know, someday the fact that people are biking these little tiny short distances, it's going to contribute to the public health picture, I think, in a certain way. If you're biking 10 minutes or 20 minutes a day by adding that extra stop, surely down the line that's going to have knock-on effects on public health that's going to make it pennies on the dollar to have spent on Daegu. Let's get back to your map that you've done of the subway. How do you source sort of the data that you do for these various Kojects projects? How did you get the various data images of the real subway and the subway map and marry those? And
we should also emphasize, there are listeners who are going to wonder how to see this map. What's the easiest way they can find the map and pull it up for themselves before you explain a little bit more about it?
So for now, the easiest way is to go to our Twitter account. Like if you're on Twitter, even if you're not on Twitter, like just go to twitter.com/Kojects and you will find them. Mm-hmm. And but also soon I will upload or like publish an article about them.
There and it is, yeah.
and then also like a little bit describe the whole process about it and everything behind it. Also like and in my article about this, I will also publish a new yet unreleased picture, so please be patient. But yeah, to go to your question about how to make these images, and actually the biggest difficulty was to find suitable pictures. Like you have to find a picture that shows as much as possible from the urban landscape without being really boring or without being too much from the top, or like having like this kind of like
it's a diagonal image of the city that you seem to have chosen. Is it some commercially available image, or
I looked up on Flickr with some Creative Commons licenses, and then I mentioned the author, for example. For Busan, I only found a picture where the owner said like it's copyright, it's his copyright, so I wrote him an email and asked, here I've made this Seoul map.
Okay.
I would like to make something of Busan. Is it okay with you if I use it for non-commercial purposes?
Yes.
And he agreed with this. And for the third one, for Daegu, I actually used a picture of myself that I made by myself from Upsan, like a small mountain. You can see a lot of Daegu.
So you've got versions of this for Busan and Daegu as well.
Yes. What about Gwangju? They have one line, right?
So that's the thing. Like Daejeon and Gwangju, they have only one line, and we should like showing. This doesn't really it's not really impressive. So yeah,
you're going to have to wait for them to build some more before you're going to make a map of their transit systems.
And then, so like some of these then drawbacks, because it's very difficult to find good pictures. In the Seoul map, for example, you don't see all lines. Like line 8, I couldn't find any picture where you can actually like also visualize line 8 or going up down to Bundang. And then also, I had the idea to actually show Pyongyang, like North Korea's capital, because they have 2 subway lines, and I think it would be really interesting for people to see.
Is that like a crisscross, like a Hong Kong style sort of thing? A T map. I don't know Pyongyang's layout, but
yeah, I just looked at the schematic map, and no, it's more like one diagonal line and one like touching up 2 times on the other line.
It's an unusual shape,
yeah.
So, and then you just did you fill in by hand the color lines, or was there some slightly more scientific way of filling it in?
There are some scientific ways to do it, like you can use some GIS, like geographical information systems and coordinates, but in my case I just use freehand because it's simple and I just try to stick to the official colors of the subway lines.
Sure.
And I think that worked quite well.
So what jumped out at you doing this about the special characteristics of Seoul's subway system? What did you, if not learn, then were reminded of about, this is interesting about Seoul's subway?
But I was very surprised to see again this loop of line 6. At the end of line, like the western end of line 6, you have this loop. And I wasn't really any more aware of this.
Up near Bukhansan area up there,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Line 6 goes up to there, and not all trains go to the same end stop. Some of them loop around and go back.
Yeah. And then also line 5 was quite interesting to draw it. Some it cuts, let's say line 5 and line 7 are very interesting because they cut through the cities, one on the northern side, one on the southern side, but they also in terms of their turns and everything, they try to cover as many kind of main spots while doing it without really looking, but also looking really ugly while doing it. So it was quite interesting.
It's not the lines are not as clean as we see on the map, on the abstracted subway map we look at all the time. You see your map or the map you see in some subway stations where it tries to superimpose the subway map on just a regular top-down map of Seoul. You see how much they have to change to get it looking neat, to get it looking like straight lines. Kind of like the original New York subway map by the Italian designer Massimo Vignelli, I think his name was. That started this whole tradition of what a subway map should look like. And
is that where the notion of a subway, where did the whole notion of a subway, an underground train, sort of first come up? You don't have to know this, but
the actual concept of a subway?
Yeah.
I think London was the first to try that out, was it not?
Yeah.
Cool.
And then the New York subway map of the 1970s really drove home this idea of what this type of graphic design is.
Sure. And then the actual first implemented subway was the London Tube.
Yeah,
I have that
London
right?
Underground.
And also this schematic maps, for example, if you look at the example of London, you have a schematic map where 2 stations of 2 different lines are looking like they're next to each other, but actually live in the real world. They're like 10 or 10 to 20 minutes walk.
That's right. That was one of the first things moving to Seoul. I was like, yeah, quote unquote transfer, but I have to walk for about 6 city blocks to get to the so-called transfer.
Factor that in your
large
calculations.
Subway crisscross areas. Do you reckon between the two of you that Korea is the standard setter in terms of stuff like this, like public transport and subway systems and just urban logistics? I would say if it's not, the standard setter, it's certainly in the top.
How does it compare to Tokyo, which is often brought up in terms of the world's best transit?
Yeah, I would say like Seoul isn't that well recognized on global world stage, and there are lots of good lessons that Seoul, that any city can take from Seoul. But yeah, usually if anybody talks about Asia or like subway systems in Asia, they think about Tokyo, or they talk about how China is picking up, but they obviously leave out Seoul, so it's not really well recognized, and not, let's say, people who are experts in this field, they know about Seoul, but then many times not really about the whole advantages.
Yeah.
And how great the system is.
I would point to 2 advantages that Seoul has over Tokyo. I think it's more accessible if you're not, a local. It's a very accessible subway system, and it's all connected via an app that you don't have to be a local to understand.
Right. Less expensive as well.
Less expensive.
Don't forget that part.
I mean, there's always, in every, Japanese station, there's always somebody extraordinarily polite, usually can, speak English and help you, with advice how to get from place to place. But it's so many different types of tickets you have to buy, and
different companies and
paper tickets, different companies. Whereas in Korea, you buy your little dongle for transport, and you can even change cities. I think my T-Money card works in Busan and Daegu, doesn't it? Yeah. We've got a comment coming in from 6883. Seattle's bike share Pronto failed more from having to use specific bike stations. The 3 bike companies now running there are successful because you can leave the bike anywhere, including the river or the troll.
There's a famous troll under a bridge in Seattle. Interesting to see that they provided no context for the troll there. But yes, any Seattleite would know what that is.
Okay.
But they have the dockless, as they call them, bike shares now, which Seoul. Is there any dockless?
There are some. I don't know if it's private or if it's the city or what, but you've seen them, right?
They're private companies led by, I think O-Bike is one of where you see most of them, and also Mobike is also coming to Korea. They have in Suwon and some other cities. They building up stations, not stations, but like bicycles, and that's still a little bit missing in Seoul. That you have like this dockless bicycles. They in China, these dockless bicycle services put up a huge revolution in terms of public transport, and it's still missing here. Yeah,
well, I mean, when you combine public transport and share bikes, and in the probably imminent future, driverless cars and enhanced bikes, electric bikes, you've got some real potential for user-friendly and eco-friendly transport. And I'm sure Nikola Kojects is going to keep mapping it, as will Colin Marshall. I think it's been great to talk to you both in one shot, 2 top-notch Korean urbanists. Thanks for coming in, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.